with a crash. Traffic can get to eastbound I-80 from the US 30 entrance ramp. But the westbound side has everything open. The inbound Eisenhower traffic is slow going Wolf to First Avenue and Costner to Demon, where the exit reopened after a rollover. It's 44 minutes from 390 to downtown. Outbound 32 after a crash at First Avenue. On the inbound Kennedy, looking at 26 minutes O'Hare to downtown, quicker the Express. To Stevenson, 31 minutes, 355 to Lakeshore Drive. The Rhine is 22 minutes, 95th to downtown after a crash at 18th Street. That's traffic. I'm Jim Helamonte on AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next in our AM 560 Weather Center. Little afternoon snow should ramp up, lake effect variety, even more in northwest Indiana. High of 18, very cold, bit of evening snow, low of 9. Currently 3 above at O'Hare, next news at 8. And Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, and your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. When you've got questions, he always has an answer. It's Sean Hannity, this afternoon at 2 on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, and this think piece in NPR. When Republicans attack quote-unquote cancel culture, what does that mean? From Danielle Kurtzleben over at NPR. She talked to some academics to get a clinical view of cancel culture from the way it's being misappropriated by Republicans, I understand. 6 or 7 years ago, the idea of canceling someone was largely used among younger people online, particularly on Black Twitter, according to Vox's Asia Romano. In that usage, cancel refers to a pretty unremarkable concept, says Nicole Holliday, assistant professor of linguistics at the University of Pennsylvania. It used to refer to a cultural boycott. We had the term boycott forever and ever. It just means I'm not going to put my attention or money or support behind this person or organization because they've done something I don't agree with. That is not new. That's very old. In other words, it was just the marketplace of ideas at work. That's all this is. What I refer to as the purge. But as the concept gained popularity, this fungible NPR columnist reports, concerns grew, particularly among media and political elites, about the threat of online mobs shutting down speech. That perceived punitive atmosphere, just perceived, came to be known as cancel culture. If people say, hey, I personally don't like this person, so I'm not going to buy the products, that's one thing, said Yasha Monk, a political scientist, which has decried the so-called cancel culture. But a lot of it is concerted efforts to force institutions to deplatform people. It's firing people for imagined or very minor offenses because of sort of online media mobs and so on. Yeah. But is that a legitimate concern? Or is it just, to take down people who have committed minor offenses, or minor offenses in the minds of some, or even if they've committed the sin of saying silly things, saying outlandish things, saying untrue things? Is it just the marketplace of ideas? Is that what we're really experiencing? Are we just misunderstanding the evolution of the boycott? And this is nothing to be concerned about. Well, to help us explore that question, we're pleased to be joined by PowerlineBlog.com's John Hinderaker, president of the Center of the American Experiment. John, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning, Dan.
So what we're seeing playing out on social media platforms, in our cultural and educational institutions, in the government at every level, it's just the marketplace of ideas, and some people saying, I'm not going to support your enterprise or your personal view on a subject, and this is really much ado about not much.
Yeah, well, of course, that's not what is happening at all, Dan. And I think here's a great example of what we're talking about. Somebody asked me the question, why can't Donald Trump get good lawyers, right? This is after watching his lawyer's performance, I guess, day before yesterday. Well, there's a very clear answer to that question. And let's begin by pointing out, Dan, that anybody can get a lawyer, right? If you are a terrorist in Guantanamo Bay, the top law firms in America will fight for the privilege of representing you for free because everybody's entitled to legal representation, right? That's the theory. Except Donald Trump. Donald Trump can't get a significant law firm to represent him. And the reason is that any law firm that represents Donald Trump in court is immediately besieged by the left-wing cancel mob. They go after the law firm, and then they identify the law firm's clients, which is easy to do online, and they start going after the clients. And we've seen this time after time after time. Any substantial law firm that undertakes to represent Donald Trump, or even like the Jones Day firm out of Cleveland, one of the biggest law firms in the United States, they had to put out a public statement saying, no, we're not representing Donald Trump. But they still got canceled. My friend Cleta Mitchell, a top lawyer.
Great election attorney.
A senior partner at the Foley and Lardner firm in their Washington, D.C. office, gave some volunteer advice to Donald Trump post-election, but while he was still the president. And that became public, and as a result, her firm was besieged by these leftists, and their clients were attacked by leftists. And she concluded that the only thing she could do, almost as a fiduciary duty to her partners, was to leave the firm. So she resigned as a partner in that law firm. We've seen this over and over and over again. So to defend President Trump in this impeachment proceeding, which is absolutely farcical, I guess we can talk about that too. It's ridiculous. He is reduced to hiring lawyers that nobody's ever heard of. That are sole practitioners or come out of very limited organizations, let's say, and are willing to apparently willing to take the heat. But this has nothing to do with, I just won't use their services. I mean, the people who besiege these law firms, they're not law firm clients, It has nothing to do with that.
Well, but how is it, just to play devil's advocate, they would say, some of these academics like that were queried for that NPR piece would say, well, right, it's like Jesse Jackson organizing a boycott in a bygone era when he claimed that Corporation A or Corporation B was being unfair to black Americans, or he just wanted to shake down for Rainbow Push, whatever the point was. So he would just organize a boycott, get the cameras out there. And that's all this is saying, hey, Foley and Lardner, Cleta Mitchell, we heard her on that call with Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and the president. We don't think she should, we can't support your law firm, or we find your law firm offensive because you employ Cleta Mitchell, because Cleta Mitchell's a partner there. So we're going to bring attention to your law firm the way Jesse Jackson used to bring attention to whichever corporation he was targeting in a particular week.
Well, this is not a boycott. What we're talking about here, Dan, is called a secondary boycott. And if the bus company was discriminating against blacks, they would picket the bus company. They wouldn't picket companies that people who rode the buses worked for. Okay, it's not the same thing. We're also talking about, again, sticking with this particular example, something that is clearly not wrongful. I mean, nobody attacks the law firms who provide free pro bono representation to terrorists. Because the theory is everybody's entitled to legal representation.
Well, terrorists is one thing. We're talking about Trump. That's just a whole different standard.
Well, it is a whole different standard. You're absolutely right. It's a unique standard. How about the law firm? The Perkins Coie firm does a lot of work for the Democratic Party. And it was that firm, and Mark Elias is the key guy there. Yeah, that was that firm that reported a bunch of money that was paid to them by the Hillary Clinton campaign, and they acted as the cutout, the bag man. They used some of that money to hire Fusion GPS to create the fake Russian dossier. And the reason you do it that way is to mislead the FEC. It shows up in an FEC filing as legal expenses, right? Because it's a check that's written to the Perkins Coie firm. Well, nobody's boycotting Perkins Coie. It's not clear to me that wasn't a crime.
Well, it seems to me. So I think Dan Henninger put his finger on it in his latest op-ed in the Journal, where he said he talked about this phrase that the left keeps using: "Our democracy." This was a threat to our democracy, almost dealt a death blow to our democracy. Our democracy, our democracy. He's thinking about this phrase, "our democracy," and he writes, "When progressives refer to our democracy, what they mean is their democracy. To be a member of their democracy, one has to share their beliefs. If you're not in, you're out, and if you're out, they may come after you for being a threat to our democracy." And that seems to me what's happening, and why they're being a little disingenuous over at NPR is, one, yes, a lot of this is coming through private institutions, but you're corrupting private institutions to behave in ways that are offensive to the norms of a free society, and you just use whatever weapons you have at your disposal in advance of authoritarianism, so private corporations when there is a utility there, and government when there's utility there, and you're not otherwise going to get yourself in a bit of a constitutional mess. If the Constitution becomes a problem, you just outsource the job to big corporations. And oh, by the way, when everything folds into the state and it's coordinated like that, all the civic institutions with the state, that's what gives rise to fascist states.
Well, that's right, Dan. I mean, you're talking about the big social media platforms and the ways in which they've been misused by the left,
and just Fortune 500 to Fortune 500 America. It's not just social media.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. There's a natural affinity between big business and big government. And what we've seen in recent years is that not all big business, but a large majority of big business has made the decision to join forces with the left and with the, not really with the government, because they certainly didn't join forces with Donald Trump, but with the Democratic Party. As you say, Dan, when the left talks about democracy, in their eyes, it's democracy when the Democratic Party wins. It's a threat to democracy when the Democratic Party loses. That's the simple definition.
Yes. Well, but on this count of big business, so the Gallup survey that came out recently, I mentioned this with Steve Moore the other day, that finds support for big business dropping among Republicans by like 25 points to less than a third of Republicans have a favorable view of big business after more than half did just a year ago, for all sorts of obvious reasons. The C-suite cultural Marxists, as well as the participation in some of this purge that we're talking about, and the rent-seeking behavior, and just so on and so forth. But the question is, much like the Republicans were a little slow on the uptake to recognize that the Democrats had jettisoned the white working class and working class families in this country generally. They were a little slow to adopt them. They could have been adopted by Mitt Romney in 2012, but he didn't see it. Trump did see it, and they were adopted by Trump in 2016. It seems like they're a little slow on the uptake to do some jettisoning themselves and make a public and formal disassociation with big business, with Fortune 500 rent seekers. And it seems to me if you want to rebrand the party post-Trump but have that sort of consistent appeal to the coalition partners that make up a majority in this country that are not part of the very insular ruling class, then you should make a very public pronouncement that all of these rent-seeking, lobbyist-laden Fortune 500 companies governed by cultural Marxists can go to hell. That we as a party are not going to take their money, and we're not going to do their bidding. We're going to set rules of the game that are fair for Wall Street and Main Street, and we're going to stop paying attention to the Wall Street money changers.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem, Dan, is that sometimes it is hard to differentiate between being pro-business competition, pro-free enterprise, and being pro-business or pro a particular business. And I think sometimes those lines get blurred. And I think Republicans in Congress often feel like they're being kind of double-crossed because they do things not because they want to help companies X, Y, and Z, but because they want to help our free businesses generally. I help the free enterprise system, and then they get kind of double crossed by the large companies. So,
well. Yeah, but John, you can't. The Republicans can't speak with one voice on eliminating, rent-seeking slush funds like the Export-Import Bank, eliminating subsidies for oil companies. Here we go. Well, I'll eliminate subsidies for fossil fuels, and by the way, we're going to eliminate subsidies across the board in the energy sector. I mean, it'd be one thing it's one thing to say that, but then there has to be something that they do that is exemplary of that stated position.
Well, I think you're right, Dan. I think you're right. There's no doubt about it. We are seeing that realignment. I mean, more and more we're seeing the Democrats as the party of the upper class. We're seeing the Republicans as the party of the middle class. You mentioned energy. The people who are most impacted by skyrocketing energy costs, such as we're getting and will get in spades with the Green New Deal, that's poorer people. The wealthy suburbanites, if their electricity bill doubles, probably won't even notice it. But the person who is just scraping by, if his electricity bill doubles, he'll suffer. That will be deprivation. And so that's a great example of an issue where the Republicans' constituency is lower income people, and they've got to get their messages in front of those people.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the same. It's the drum I beat on school choice too, and I knew you do as well. But it's just you don't have Republicans. You have initiatives at the state level, but I mean, take up this as a cause celeb for the Republican Party's existence, particularly coming out of the pandemic. For goodness sakes, we are the party that is going to give people, lower middle income families, the same choices for their kids' education as the wealthy and the politically connected. So no matter what happens ever again, you have the same choices for your kids that the wealthy and the politically connected do. How complicated is that?
Well, a lot of us have been saying that for a long time.
I know.
You probably know, Dan, my organization has been campaigning for school choice for 30 years. But one silver lining of the epidemic is that many, many parents have finally figured out that the public schools, and especially the teachers' unions, are not on their side. And there's much more interest simply because parents have had to look for alternatives because the public schools have been shut down, not serving their children. So more parents than ever before have both been looking into alternatives to the public schools and in many cases pursuing those alternatives. And I think you're right. I think this is a message that a lot of people's eyes have been opened to and that needs to be a signature issue on the right.
He is John Hinderaker. He is the publisher of Powerline, founder and publisher of PowerlineBlog.com, and president of the Center for the American Experiment. John, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Dan. Bye-bye.
And you joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
Nobody wants to need an attorney, but when you do, you need to find the right firm. The one that shares your values and will take your case personally. That's Cuda Law. You get the entire Cuda Law team working on your case, even the cell phone number of your lead attorney.